What's going on, everybody? The Networking Guru here. We're about to go over 70 practice exam questions for the Network Plus exam. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below, share with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to the channel because we're getting everybody certified around here. So, let's show my screen. We're going to go to our learning management system, our academy is what we call it at Trepa Technologies. If you want access to this, hit the link in the description below where you get all these questions. And even bonus content, flashcards, access to our network, live virtual training if you want it to at a different price. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So we're going to come down here to our quizzes. And we're going to do our domain 2 quizzes. So I got 70 questions here that we're going to go over. I'm going to try to slow it down for my last video. I think I went a little bit too fast. We're going to make sure that we are taking our time reading the explanations for these 70 questions. All right, just had to turn that light off, and let's go ahead and get started. So there's going to be 70 questions going over domain 2 of the Network Plus exam. Let me make sure my face is at a good angle here. We know, seeing my face is very important for you guys to pass the exam. Come on. Okay, question 1. Which of the following allows a single physical interface to be divided into multiple logical interfaces for different network segments? That's going to be a sub-interface. The sub-interface on a router is typically connected to a trunk of a switch, and that's going to be your first downstream switch. And that's going to allow us to do inter-VLAN routing by creating logical sub-interfaces that are assigned to a VLAN tag. So what we mean by that is, if we go into interface gig 00, and we have 3 VLANs, VLAN 10, 20, and 30. Actually, let me get my pen up real quick. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, here we go. I got my pen up. So let's say we have like R1. Here, we have a router connected to a switch. And we have let's just say 2 VLANs. We have VLAN 20 and we have VLAN 30. So each one is going to have its own subnet mask. So when I have a user down here in VLAN 30 connected to this port, let's say it's port gig 0, whatever. This is gig 0/10. That's going to be part of VLAN 30. So when this user sends traffic, the switch is going to tag it with VLAN 30. It's going to insert a 4-byte header. If we have VLAN 20 over here, and this is, let's say, gig 0/11, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to tag all traffic here. It's going to insert into that frame a 4-byte header that says it's part of VLAN 20. Now, each one of these VLANs is going to be part of its own broadcast network, meaning it's going to have its own subnet. So a default gateway in this scenario, we would technically need 2 interfaces. We would technically need 2 physical interfaces where one interface on that router was for one subnet and another interface is for another subnet, because we know there's only one IP address per interface. Well, what we can do now, instead of doing that, because it just doesn't make sense to have a router with as many ports as a switch, because you could have a 24-port switch with 24 VLANs, right? We just create sub-interfaces. So here at R1, let's say we have gig 00. What we're going to do is create a logical sub-interface, and we're going to tell this sub-interface, you're going to do the routing for VLAN 20, and we can make another sub-interface for VLAN 30, and we can tell it, hey, you're going to be doing the routing for VLAN 30. That's what a sub-interface is, a logical interface that allows us to have inter-VLAN communication. And when I say, so this one says logical interfaces for different network segments, that's what it means. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 2. Which of the following best describes the differences between WPA2 Enterprise and WPA2 Personal? Now, whether we're talking WPA, WPA2, or 3, Personal and Enterprise are always, the differences are the same amongst all the different Wi-Fi protected accesses encryption. Enterprise has a centralized server. It's using Radius or TACX to actually have some sort of centralized authentication authorization for users accessing a wireless network. Typically, Radius is involved, maybe 802.1x. With Personal, sometimes called WPA2-PSK, uses what's called a pre-shared key. It's just a password. That's what you use at home. You type in your Wi-Fi password, buddy comes over, tries to bum your Wi-Fi. That's PSK. When you log in with username and password, that means Enterprise is configured. On the back end, we have a much more robust Enterprise with a AAA server using Radius 802.1x, maybe Cisco Identity Services Engine with LDAP integrated for Active Directory, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to go with A here. WPA2 Enterprise requires a centralized authentication server, while WPA2 Personal uses a pre-shared key. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 3. Which dynamic routing protocol is most commonly used for routing between autonomous systems on the internet? So that's going to be the Border Gateway Protocol. So out of the major routing protocols, we have, well, out of all the routing protocols, we have two major ways to separate them. IGP, which is Interior Gateway Protocol, and then underneath there, we'll have things like Distance Vector, Link State, Advanced Distance Vector Protocols, so DV, Link State Protocols. I guess I don't know how to spell sometimes. Link State. Okay, and so that'll be stuff like OSPF, ISIS. For distance vector, that'll be RIP. And then we have another one called ERGRP, which I think it's in a class of its own. Some people call it a hybrid distance vector or advanced distance vector, but I mean, it has its own algorithm. Anyways, and all these are going to be for routing within an autonomous system, within a domain. So if I have an autonomous system 50 here, this is like an ISP or a data center, or whatever the case may be, a transient autonomous system. We have all the routers in here, sharing routes with each other. More than what's going to be happening inside of here is it's going to be an IGP doing that routing. But now let's say we have another autonomous system, AS510. This connection between autonomous systems is going to be using an exterior gateway protocol called BGP, which, yes, is a routing protocol, but it's actually an application. It runs on layer 7, but that's BGP, okay? So that is the routing protocol we use for routing between autonomous systems. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 4. Which metric is used by OSPF to determine the best path to a destination? OSPF uses bandwidth. That's the metric that it determines a reference bandwidth of 100 megabits per second divided by actual bandwidth on a link. Oh, you know what? Hold on. When we use bandwidth to determine the metric of OSPF, but in OSPF language, it's actually called cost. So I'm going to go with cost here. So yes, the metric that OSPF uses is bandwidth. That's the SPF algorithm, shortest path first algorithm, takes a reference bandwidth divided by the actual bandwidth of a link to determine a route's or a network's cost, okay? So cost is what's actually, so it uses a metric called cost to determine, but that's the actual algorithm. Reference bandwidth divided by actual bandwidth. So good, it's a good catch. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 5. Which wireless technology ensures compliance with regulations regarding radar system interference in the 5 gigahertz band? So that's going to be the dynamic frequency selection. This is just a regulatory body, right, that says, hey, or when we create an access point, a Wi-Fi enabled access point that wants to operate in the 5 gigahertz range, part of that standard is that we have DFS on there to ensure that Wi-Fi devices operating that range don't interfere with radar systems because they're going to be operating on the same band. Question 6. What is the primary advantage of using a lightweight access point over an autonomous access point? So autonomous access point, they don't scale. They're going to do everything, the routing, the switching, the firewall, the DHCP server, they do everything. It's typically in our small offices, home offices, 1 to 5, 10 people devices maybe. Your home may have a lot of stuff, but they're not centrally managed. You have to go into each individual access point to manage them. Where lightweight access points, that's for scale. That's for our enterprise, our big campus, our medium to big size organizations that are centrally managed by a wireless LAN controller. So lightweight access points offer centralized management and are easier to scale. That is C. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 7. What is the primary function of a captive portal on a guest network? Captive portal, that's something we activate on a wireless network, typically in public. So you go to your local coffee shop, Starbucks, you want to log into the Wi-Fi. If they don't just give you a pre-shared key, they're going to say, okay, log into that captive portal, buy a coffee, here's your receipt with the Wi-Fi code. Go to a hotel. It's usually going to be a captive portal with your room number and your last name. So it's going to be prevent unauthorized users from accessing the network. It's open. It's open, right? That's there's not going to be maybe encryption on it like WPA when you're using a captive portal, but it's going to give a login page, right? Before you get internet access. C is more accurate. A is accurate too, but it says primary function. That's exactly what a captive portal does. Authentication mechanism, typically via a login page, right? Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 8. Which of the following best describes the function of an intermediate distribution frame? So the IDF is typically in a comms closet. Maybe you have one on each floor that connects back to the MDF that may sit in your local data center, wherever your core devices are. So it's not the central point. It's typically there to connect to endpoints. You have your access switches there, and then connected to the IDF, then going into wall jacks, and then maybe like multi-mode fiber back to the main distribution frame where your like data center core switching would be. That's going to be B. It houses smaller networking equipment and connects end user devices to the larger network. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 9. Which of the following best describes the function of band steering in a wireless network? So band steering, that's the ability to switch between overlapping, non-overlapping channels. So let's go ahead and look at our answers here. Okay, let's take a look at our answers. B, switching between overlapping. No, we don't. Overlapping channels cause interference, so it's not B. Prioritizing certain devices for network access. No. So best describes the function. Multiple SSIDs simultaneously. No, we cannot do that. We need one wireless NIC per SSID. So I'm going to go with C here. Automatically connecting dual band devices to the 5 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz band. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 10. What is the primary benefit of using jumbo frames on a switch? Let's see. It doesn't do anything with security. A jumbo frame, it's going to be anything over 1,500 bytes. Typically, if you enable it, if the MTU is like 9,000, so we have jumbo frames. It doesn't prevent network loops. Spanning tree does that. It doesn't support multicast traffic better. We're going to go with A. Increases transmission speed by reducing the number of frames. And that's what it does, right? So a jumbo frame is 9,000 bytes. That's typically what the MTU is going to be. A giant frame, I got those confused, is something that's over 1,500 bytes. And that's going to be like not a good thing. That's going to be you have packet loss and stuff like that. But a jumbo frame is something we can configure on an actual switch, saying, hey, your MTU is going to be 9,000 now, so expect that, right? And forward like that between your switch in your switch environment. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 11. What is the key difference between an autonomous access point and a lightweight access point? Autonomous access points, again, they're managed individually. They have their own web GUI. A lightweight access points do need a wireless LAN controller. So I'm going to go with B here. That's our answer. Autonomous access points operate independently, while lightweight APs require a controller for management. That's exactly what they do with lightweight access points scaling higher. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 12. Which of the following is true about VLANs, virtual local area networks? So VLANs, what do? They do network segmentation at layer 2, creating different broadcast domains within your LAN by inserting a 4-byte header into that Ethernet frame that just says, hey, this is your VLAN number. So our VLANs are numbers 1 through 4094, and it's 4 bytes, okay? So it's not C. They don't group by physical location. VLANs can communicate with each other. Well, it's not necessarily, they don't, because they can have a multi-layer switch that has SVIs created on it. A, VLAN segment the local area network by inserting a 4-byte header into the Ethernet frame. That's what I am going to choose. Now, 802.1q, that's the open standard. The IEEE standard is a 4-byte header. There is another VLAN standard from Cisco called ISL that not talked about in the Network Plus exam. That is like a 26-byte header, but it doesn't matter, I guess. So I'm teaching Cisco this week too. It's in making these videos before that, so I'm like, oh, Cisco brained. Okay, pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 13. Which encryption protocol is currently considered the most secure for wireless networks? So as of this time, for the Network Plus exam, it's WPA3. For the N10-009 exam. So this has increased encryption. It still uses AES like WPA2, but we have increased bit key lengths up to 256 bits for AES. And then we also have an enhancement called SAE, simultaneous authentication of equals, for our WPA3 pre-shared keys configuration that gives us perfect forward secrecy and also prevents us from brute force attacks. Question 14. What is the primary benefit of implementing a hot-cold aisle layout in a data center? So that's just making sure our environmental factors are controlled in our data center. And it does this by pretty much not allowing our devices to overheat, because each device will have an exhaust. Sometimes devices have cold air intake. That's how these network devices that are running 24/7, maybe doing a lot of switching and routing, they need that, right? They need to be cooled off. So we're going to go with C here. It improves cooling efficiency by separating cold air intake and hot air exhaust areas. And that's exactly what they are. Some aisles, usually in the front of the device, right, where the cold air intake is fucking cold. And you work in a data center, you got to put a jacket on. And then the hot aisles will be behind that, where you have two racks blowing hot air at each other and it's going whoop, up and out. It's kind of crazy working in data centers because it can get so cold. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 15. Which first hop redundancy protocol is an open standard and not proprietary to a specific vendor? That is going to be VRRP, the Virtual Route Redundancy Protocol. HSRP and GLBP, well, HSRP is Cisco proprietary. And so is GLBP. So go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 16. Which of the following is a key function of a patch panel in network installation? So patch panels, switch. So imagine a data center. You have your switches, and then you have your patch panel. That's going to allow you to patch your switches to a panel that then maybe runs from an IDF to MDF or into your wall jacks. So let's look at our questions here and see what's most accurate. To connect and organize network cabling, making it easier to connect devices to the network. It doesn't provide backup power. So a patch, there is fiber patch panels, but I believe in this question, if C was the answer, the question would say a fiber patch panel or something related to fiber. It doesn't manage power. So I'm going to go with A. To connect and organize network cabling, making it easier to connect devices to the network. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 17. In which scenario would you most likely use a point-to-point wireless network? So that's like an ad hoc point-to-point wireless network. I know in the real world, I've done this with air fiber. It's like Ubiquiti air fiber. It's pretty cool. Where you can, like on an airfield, for instance, you can't run cable. You don't want to run fiber underneath, but you got like a mile, maybe half a mile of distance. You can put that air fiber up and it can be direct point-to-point. And you get like gigabits of speed throughput on that point-to-point link. So, with that being said, a group of attendees. I'm going to go with D. Connecting two buildings on a corporate campus across a long distance, and you don't want to run a cable. That's a good solution because you have high speeds now, especially if it's like, okay, we have our main campus. We have like 500 meters that way. We have this little office that we use for research that maybe has 20 people at most online, 20 devices. We're not going to dig up and run cat or fiber. We can't run cat 5. Just antenna, air fiber, the point-to-point wireless network. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 18. What is the primary benefit of using network address translation? So NAT is the technology that enables private IPs to connect on the internet. So remember, with RFC 1918 addresses, that's the private range that cannot be routable on the internet. That if you went to your Windows computer and did an IP config, you would have one of these IP addresses because you are using a private IP address. But since it's not routable on the internet, what we have to do in our outside interface here is translate it. Because this will be a public IP sitting here. Remember, this is the ISP. Let's say this is our customer edge. This will be a public IP. And then internal, this is our LAN. that's going to be like 192.168.0.0/24. So this public IP, let's say it's 50.1.2.3. NAT's going to enable this private IPs to be translated to this public IP. And we can have all these private IPs translated to this public IP using a technology called PAT, port address translation. It's also going to map port numbers in your network table, your NAT table. But back to the question. So it doesn't provide redundancy. It allows multiple devices to share a single public IP address. It doesn't do C or D. It doesn't load balance or update routing tables. So yes, it's B. It allows multiple devices to share a single public IP address. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 19. What is the primary advantage of static routing over dynamic routing? It's not scalable. Reduced configuration time is also not true depending on how many static routes you need. And it doesn't do automatic route updates. It is obviously less intensive on the CPU and compute resources of a router because there's no updating and algorithms and synchronization and convergence. It's just a static route. So we'll see. Lower resource consumption on the router. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 20. What is the primary purpose of band steering in wireless networks? Kind of a redundant question, but that's okay. So we're going to go with B here. To guide devices to connect to the less congested frequency band. That's another thing that band steering does for us. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 21. What is the primary role of an intermediate distribution frame in a network? It's that, again, that's going to be like in our comms closets, on a floor, for endpoints, for those access switches, and to connect you back to the MDF. So it's not the main distribution point. To serve as secondary distribution point within different floors. Because the distribution frame, that's not like providing internet access. That's what your switch does, connecting to the backbone. So I do believe it's going to be B here. To serve as a secondary distribution point within different floors or sections of a building. And that's exactly what it does. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 22. Which frequency band provides the largest number of non-overlapping channels? This is a good one because I don't even think I talked about it in the lecture. We have three major bands now, frequency ranges that we use for Wi-Fi, 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz only has 3 channels that are non-overlapping, 1, 6, and 11. 5 gigahertz, I think, it's in the explanation, I think only has 25 channels that you could possibly use, depending how big the channel is, from 40 to 80 megahertz. 80 megahertz is going to be more overlapping, but only has like 25. But 6 gigahertz expands us and gives us a lot of non-overlapping channels with still high bandwidth rates. And 60 gigahertz is not a Wi-Fi range. That'd be crazy. But yes, it says it right here. The 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi band provides 80 megahertz of spectrum with only 3 non-overlapping. 5 gigahertz only has 25 channels that are non-overlapping. And then 6 gigahertz provides 59 channels because it has a huge range, 1200 megahertz of unrestricted spectrum to use. Question 23. What is the purpose of 802.1q tagging on a switch? It's just, that's VLANs, right? That 802.1q is the trunking VLAN standard for VLANs, for network segmentation at the frame level. So C, to identify which VLAN data packets belong to the IEEE 802.1q standard. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. I gotta keep drinking water, guys. I'm using my voice a lot. Question 24. Which of the following protocols provides both redundancy and load balancing across multiple routers? So the only first hop redundancy protocol that does something other than just redundancy does load balancing. You don't have like active virtual forwarding routers, but you can configure those to be load balancing 33%, 33%, 33%, right? It's going to be GLBP, the Gateway Load Balancing Protocol. If you know the acronym, you'll know this answer. Go ahead and pause and read the explanation if you'd like. Question 25. What factors should be carefully monitored when configuring port side exhaust and intake for network equipment? So how do we make sure that we are keeping our environmentals good? we got to keep our airflow. We got to make sure we're maintaining that hot and cold aisle format in our data centers. So I'm going to go with A. Airflow direction to maintain proper cooling. Go ahead and pause and read the explanation if you'd like. Question 26. Which protocol is used to prevent loops in a switch network? That's a span tree protocol. To prevent those broadcast storms or switching loops, we use spanning tree, which is like automatic on switches that send BPDUs to each other that determine a root bridge, and then switches from there determine root ports and elect a discarding port that prevents the loops. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 27. Which of the following routing protocols uses the Dijkstra algorithm for determining the shortest path? OSPF, open shortest path first. You know that acronym, you're probably going to get this question right. But yes, Dijkstra is the actual name of the mathematical algorithm that determines the shortest path first in a routing environment and domain. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 28. What is the purpose of a power distribution unit in a network rack? Well, to distribute. It's going to be B, to distribute electrical power to multiple devices within the rack. To convert power to the correct voltage for network devices. It doesn't do that. Like, it's not going to convert like European, US, but I can see that one being tricky for some, but it is B, to distribute electrical power to multiple devices within the rack. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 29. Why is it important to maintain optimal humidity levels in a data center? Some more environmental factors. So our equipment doesn't get messed up. So we don't have static discharge for one, and to also avoid corrosion, because these are metal electrical pieces of equipment that can, water's not good for it. Humidity is not good for those parts, pieces. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 30. Which authentication method is typically used in an enterprise wireless network for more robust security? Authentication. That's going to be our enterprise, where we have a AAA or Radius server that's managing username and passwords that are granting access, giving authorization, and things like that. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 31. What is the main purpose of enhanced interior gateway routing protocol in a network? So it's an interior gateway protocol. It's considered like a hybrid or advanced distant vector protocol. And it's used to, have full convergence and an automatic routing protocol in an autonomous system, within an autonomous system. So it's going to be B. It is an advanced distance vector protocol designed to optimize routes within an autonomous system. It says advanced distance vector, but hop count doesn't come into play at all. The two main values in its dual algorithm is actually bandwidth and delay. Oh, I forgot to show the explanation. Let me go back. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 32. In routing, which of the following is a factor in route selection that prioritizes routes with the longer prefix length? That's the prefix length. That's a good question, right? In a routing table, what is the first thing it looks at to determine the best path? The longest prefix length, meaning if a destination IP falls within a route that has a higher subnet mask, meaning more network bits in the subnet mask, /24 versus /27, and the destination IP falls within both those network ranges, it's choosing the /27 because it has a longer prefix. And then if all prefix lengths are the same, it chooses AD as the best way, the best path. If all the ADs are the same and the prefix lists are the same, then it goes over the metric, the lowest metric or cost. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 33. Which of the following best explains why an UPS, uninterruptible power supply, is critical in a network installation? That's like our battery backup for all of our network devices. I'm going to call it long-term. I would say C is going to be our good answer here. It supplies temporary power during outages, allowing for safe shutdowns or switching to backup generators. Yeah, it's that in a big data center, that's what it's doing. It's just giving you enough time to hopefully the power comes out. It helps prevent rolling brownouts. So if you get brownouts and you lose voltage, UPS can take over and be like, no, we're not gonna let these devices get messed up if you're in a country or an area that has those. And then in a full blackout, power outage, it can maybe keep you up, depending on what kind of ups you have, what kind of equipment, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, at least enough time to maybe have those generators switch over if you don't have an ATS that does it automatically, or to do safe shutdowns of the servers and compute and storage and network equipment. Question 34. What is the main benefit of configuring a voice VLAN? So the voice VLAN is something unique that's going to give VoIP traffic within the LAN a quality of service tag, a cost, right? So A, it allows voice traffic to be assigned a higher priority. It's kind of a quality of service mechanism in layer 2. There's the explanation. Pause the video if you'd like to read it. Question 35. Bridge parameters should be checked if 2 switches connected through a trunk port cannot pass traffic for certain VLANs. Okay. So automatically, I'm thinking, are we pruning the VLANs? Are we not letting them across the trunk? It's not going to be A. It has nothing to do with it. Speed and duplex settings. That would just be basic. Like, we don't have connectivity. It wouldn't have anything to do with VLANs. We just wouldn't have connectivity. It would be intermittent if those are messed up. The native VLAN, if it's different between the two, yeah, we'll get errors. But traffic could still pass for other VLANs. I'm going to go with B here. The VLAN tagging protocol. So we got to check if some VLANs are not passing over trunk. It's misconfiguration with VLAN tagging. Okay, yeah. There's the explanation. Read it if you'd like. Question 36. What is the primary purpose of a virtual IP in network routing? So that's like a VIP, a virtual IP, can be used in load balancing, could be used in first hop redundancy protocols, and that will be your default gateway that's shared amongst all the routers, but not what's actually assigned to that physical interface. So we're going to go with B here. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 37. Which of the following techniques is used by NAT to allow multiple devices on a local network to access the internet using a single public IP address? That's PAT. So with PAT, when we're doing NAT, we actually have a NAT table that maintains the port addresses as well. So imagine we have something like this. Router on this side. This is our public IP 1.1.1. On this side, 10.0.0.0/24. And what's going to happen, let's say we have this IP, 10.10.10, that's destined to 4.3.2.1, another public IP. What this PAT-enabled router is going to do, and let's say it's accessing this via port 80. It's a web server. And so it gives itself a random ephemeral port. What's going to happen is the router is going to maintain that. It's going to say, hey, this user's accessing this public IP via port 80. Here's its ephemeral port. When I translate you to my public IP, I'm going to maintain a table that says, hey, 5.1, let me rewrite that. 5.1.4.2.2 is destined to 4.3.2.1 with socket 80. And then when it responds back, and this server is responding back, and now it's destined to 1.1.1.1 5.1.4.2.2, the router's going to see that and be like, oh, hey, that server's responding to me at this port number. That actually belongs to this user at this private IP, which would just be a user over here, right, with the 10.0.0.10. So it maintains that state table that's like mapping based off port number to all the different private IP address users in here. That's how PAT works at a very dumbed down low level. But yes, port address translation enables that. Question 38. What is the purpose of 802.1q tagging in VLANs? So we're going to go with D here. To allow multiple VLANs to communicate over a trunk link. That's what 802.1q does. So if we configure a trunk and we say switchport trunk encapsulation 802.1q, we're saying use this encapsulation standard to allow multiple VLANs through this trunk. Go ahead and pause the video to read the explanation. Question 39. In a trunking configuration, which VLAN is used to carry untagged traffic by default? The default VLAN is also the native VLAN, sometimes called VLAN 1, but that's just all your untagged traffic. So that is out of the box. You'll power on that switch. You don't need any VLANs. You just have one network you're working with. That's going to be the native VLAN or untagged default VLAN that's being used in the network when users are communicating. Go ahead and pause the video to read the explanation. Question 40. Which technology prevents layer 2 loops in a network by creating a loop-free topology? Spanning tree protocol. Already went over this, but it's fine to have a little redundancy. Go ahead and pause the video to read the explanation. Question 41. Which type of wireless network configuration uses multiple nodes to dynamically route data across a network, improving coverage and redundancy? So it's not ad hoc or point-to-point. Those are kind of similar. It's just like direct. Here, we're multiple nodes to dynamically route data across a network, improving coverage and redundancy. Now, mesh is typically used for our autonomous access points to have a mesh network that can, again, like it's saying, route between these access points. Infrastructure mode, though, sometimes is also... I'm going to go with D here. I think this answer is looking for mesh. So yes, mesh networks use multiple interconnected nodes to provide dynamic routing for data. This is typically used with autonomous access points. Go ahead and pause if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 42. Which authentication method is typically used with WPA2 in home networks? That's pre-shared key. In home networks, you just type in give me your Wi-Fi password. That's PSK. WPA3 uses SAE, but it's still pre-shared key. It's just a password. But that's the enhanced protections. But it said WPA2 anyway, so... Okay, pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 43. Which of the following SSIDs is associated with a single access point and its clients? That's going to be a BSSID. That is the basic service set identifier that just identifies a single access point in a single wireless network. Because remember, SSIDs actually correlate to wireless networks, because an access point could be broadcasting 4 SSIDs that correlate to 4 different subnets and networks in your environment. Question 44. Which of the following channel widths is typically used to reduce interference in the 2.4 gigahertz range? So it's 20 megahertz. Technically, you really look at the spectrum, it's like 22 megahertz, but that's okay. 20 megahertz, acceptable answer. And that's our 3 non-overlapping channels. Channel 1, 6, and 11 are 20 megahertz ranges. That's its bandwidth. Pause the video to read the explanation. Question 45. Which type of antenna should be used in a Wi-Fi setup where the goal is to cover a broad area in all directions from a central location? That's going to be an omnidirectional antenna. That's going to want to propagate 360 as much as it can. So omnidirectional antenna. Pause the video to read the explanation. Question 46. What is the default maximum transmission unit for Ethernet networks? The default, 1500 bytes. That's always the MTU. That's going to be in the data payload, right? Along with all its headers, 1500 bytes. Question 47. Which of the following is true about static routing? It is manually configured. Static routes are manually configured. You know, routing protocols are configured by us too, whether it's controller-based or traditional network. But I understand what it's saying. It's manually, right? But there is no automatic updates. It's not technically a dynamic routing protocol. It isn't. It's technically it is a routing protocol, static routes, but it's not a dynamic routing protocol. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. I zoomed in here and I feel like it looks so much better. Should have been doing this the whole time. Which antenna type is best suited for providing wireless coverage in all directions? Omnidirectional again, little repeat there. That's okay. Hit it over the head, what omnidirectional is. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 49. What is the primary purpose of creating VLANs on a network? That's segmentation, to enable segmentation on layer 2, correlating different broadcast domains and subnets. So we're going to go with B, to enable segmentation of a network into different broadcast domains. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 50. Which protocol is primarily used as an exterior gateway protocol to connect different autonomous systems? That is BGP. I know we have some repeats. That's okay, though, because typically in our software, we will shuffle these for you, and this is just hitting it over the head. Domain 2 is kind of a smaller domain, but yes, it is BGP, so we're going to have a couple of repeats. That's okay. Question 51. Why is it important to consider voltage requirements when installing network devices? So, I mean, it can damage networks. You may not have enough voltage. So, we're going to go with B. Incorrect voltage can damage network devices, leading to equipment failure. Let's read some of these other ones here. Is it A, using wrong voltage? Nah, I mean, no, that's not what it actually does. Maybe that could be a symptom. But anyways, that is B. Incorrect voltage can damage network devices, leading to equipment failure. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 52. What should be considered when selecting a rack size for network equipment installation? The dimensions. Just, is this rack big, tall enough? Does it have enough depth for the servers, switches, or routers that I may need? The physical dimensions, just the rack space. So let's see. Physical dimensions and rack unit space requirements of the equipment. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 53. Which of the following methods is commonly used to authenticate users on guest networks, especially in public places like airports or coffee shops? That's going to be our captive portal. Talked about this already, but that's a way to authenticate guest users to access your wireless network. Question 54. Which of the following is a major improvement introduced by WPA3 over WPA2? So it's A and B, but what they're looking for is B. I think the most correct answer here is B. Simultaneous authentication equals was introduced in WPA3 for PSK. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Which protocol would you configure to provide redundancy for a gateway IP address, allowing a backup router to take over if the primary router fails? That's a first hop redundancy protocol. We have three types: HSRP, VRRP, and GLBP, which allow us to have redundancy on our gateways. Question 56. Which of the following is used to combine multiple physical links into a single logical link for increased bandwidth and redundancy? A lot of different names for this: port channeling, port bonding, ether channel. Here, we're calling it link aggregation, which takes physical member interfaces, like 2, 4, 8 physical interfaces, and logically bundles them into a logical single interface, increasing our bandwidth. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 57. What is the primary function of a switch virtual interface? That's to route traffic between VLANs. That's how we make a multi-layer switch, by configuring a SVI that gives a default gateway. So we make VLAN 20, then we type in interface VLAN 20 with an IP address, and now that's routing for VLAN 20 and gives that switch IP addressing capabilities. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 58. Why is it important to maintain proper humidity levels in a data center or network? Data loss. Let's go with D here. High humidity can lead to condensation, while low humidity increases the risk of static electricity. Kind of another repeat. Read the explanation if you'd like. Pause the video. Question 59. 10 more to go. Which of the following would be most effective for fire suppression in a data center environment? So data center, electrical equipment fires, you don't want to put water on that. There's going to be certain systems that you want to do. Typically, you want to take the oxygen out. Not halon, though. That's old school and very deadly. So we're going to go with C. Clean Agent Fire Suppression Systems FM-200. Modern way of doing it. Go ahead and read the explanation if you'd like. I'm going to pause the video because my background's freaking me out right now. Sorry about that. I guess there's no way to fix it. I'm going to have to get some curtains over my front office door because it's bugging me. I don't know if you guys can see behind my head, but anyways. Where are we at? Question 60. What is the purpose of a fiber distribution panel in a network installation? Let's see here. It's going to be A, right? It's kind of a gimme. To provide a central point for managing and organizing fiber optic connections. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 61. In HSRP, the hot standby redundancy protocol, what determines which router will take the role of the active router? And that's going to be the router with the highest priority. So HSRP has a priority of 1 to 255, default being 100. Higher priority wins between the two routers, and that's what you configure on the actual interface that will be participating in HSRP. Pause the video to read the explanation. Question 62. What should be a primary consideration when placing an MDF in a building? So we're going to go with D. The MDF, that's where your core is, where your data center may be, core switch, core router. It should be located near the incoming telecommunications line to be secure for access control. That's where the MDF should be, where you're going to have that ISP connection. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 63. Which characteristic of a routing protocol is defined by its administrative distance? That's going to be A, the trustworthiness or preference level of the route. Question 64. I forgot to do the explanation. We'll move on though. In a VLAN configuration, which VLAN is commonly assigned to devices that carry voice traffic, allowing quality of service prioritization? That's the voice VLAN, a unique VLAN. All VLANs 1 through 4094 are access VLANs that you name something like printer, server VLAN, whatever you want to do in your own environment. But a voice VLAN is unique, much like the native VLAN, that it's specifically designed for VoIP traffic. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 65. When planning for power requirements, why is it essential to consider power load distribution? So, I mean, you don't want to overload, you don't want to underload your power. So if you're managing data center, power is something that you're going to have to manage or have someone come in and do it for you. Pause the video to read the explanation. Question 66. What is the primary benefit of using the 5 GHz frequency band over the 2.4 GHz band in a wireless network? So 5 GHz, broader, more bandwidth per channel because it's going to be a standard 40 megahertz and you have up to 80, maybe 160 channel bonding, and you have more channels to choose from that are non-overlapping. But it doesn't go through walls as well. 2.4 gigahertz, it only has 3 non-overlapping channels, 20 megahertz, 22 megahertz range, not as much bandwidth, not as much speed available, but it goes a longer distance. You drop 2.4 gigahertz in the middle of a football field, it's lighting that thing up like a Christmas tree on your wireless scanner. And it penetrates through walls better. That's the benefits of 2.4 gigahertz. Now 5 gigahertz, it beat. More non-overlapping channels and less interference. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 67. Which of the following is a virtual interface on a switch that allows layer 3 routing within a VLAN? That's an SVI. A switch virtual interface enables our switch to be multi-layered and gives a VLAN a broadcast domain IP addressing capabilities, routing capabilities. Pause the video to read the explanation. Question 68. What does duplex settings on a switch interface control? The ability to send and receive simultaneously. Full duplex, you can send and receive on any Ethernet segment per cable. With half duplex, it's send or receive, which we don't like. We don't use anymore. We don't have hubs and repeaters no more. Go ahead and pause the video to read the explanation. Question 69. Why is it recommended to use lockable racks in network installations? I mean, it's just protection, right? It's protection, physical protection. Last question. Question 70. Which is a key feature of a mesh network compared to traditional infrastructure wireless networks? So we're going to go with C. In a mesh network, multiple nodes work together to provide coverage and automatically reroute data if one node fails. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. And look at this, guys. We got 100%. Let's go. So if you're interested in getting access to this material, go ahead and click that link in the description below where you can get access to our learning management system with all these questions for lifetime access. You can take as much as you want. We have a mobile application. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video where we probably will have 100 questions for Domain 3. Domain 2 is just a little smaller, so not as much. Domain 4 probably 50. And then we'll go from there. Domain 5, I don't know how many questions we're going to do. We did it. Rewatch this video if you want to keep learning. I'll see you in the next video. Let's get everyone certified.